And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on Sunday, November 2nd, 2025. And we start with the state of the sea ice. The ice continues to grow. Early season development across the Beaufort Sea coast down along the Chukchi Sea, including Kotzebue Sound, and then rounding along the Seward Peninsula on up into Norton Sound, especially tucked away up into that northeastern quadrant there, north of Shaktoolik and east of Golovin. Otherwise, this is just going to be a process that is ongoing here as we slip further into the fall and early winter emerges. And looking at the satellite imagery, we still see a scattering of showers, this kind of popcorn-like convective pattern to the clouds. And low pressure sitting here over the northern Gulf will continue to slowly weaken as it works its way westward. Lingering trough along the Gulf Coast will keep a few showers going along the Gulf Coast into parts of the Panhandle. Meanwhile, low pressure is currently crossing the Aleutians. It does have some areas of rain and gusty winds. The stronger winds that had been plaguing the West Coast are beginning to wind down, especially through the Bering Strait and the north side of St. Lawrence Island. They've already let up now along the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta coastlines, and that trend will continue. Stronger winds, though, have been occurring easterly, polar easterly winds here. Kaktovik through Utqiagvik and down through Wainwright, Point Lay to the Lisburn Peninsula. Winds are going to remain brisk in this region this Sunday night into Monday, and even holding up into Tuesday out toward Kaktovik and Demarcation Bay. So looking at the weather map late tonight, weak low pressure here just north of the Bering Strait, east side of Russia. Trough extending in along the YK deltas. Another trough along the northern and eastern Gulf Coast. And then the low that had crossed the Aleutians today will be slipping, developing southeastward into the North Pacific, with yet another low that'll be dropping southeastward across the Aleutians on Tuesday. So Monday afternoon, we find the next low that's in the North Pacific south of the Gulf. There's going to be the lead. This is the first little wave of low pressure that rotates to the north and west, and that's actually going to push some more showers into the Panhandle Monday night into Tuesday. Meanwhile, this low in the western Bering will continue southeastward, and that'll be crossing the Aleutians later Tuesday afternoon and night. Here comes that next low out of the North Pacific, drifting to the north-northwest. It'll emerge into the western Gulf on Wednesday. And this is a moist system. There'll be another one rotate up from the North Pacific on Friday. So the most active weather in the week ahead, especially mid to late week, is going to be along the Gulf Coast. Some of this moisture may be able to get inland, could even create some snow parts of South Central. We'll see if that actually comes to pass, but we are certainly at that point in the year where we should start to see our first notable measurable snowfall in some areas of South Central. So for Monday, southeast winds, inner channels around 10 knots, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage waves a couple of feet, maybe 4 or 5 footers there outside of Ketchikan, Metlakatla. The outer coast winds are generally southeasterly 15 knots outside of Cross Sound, Port Alexander, and off of the Prince of Wales Island with waves 8 to 10 feet. East winds outside of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling with waves running 6-7 feet. On Tuesday, winds are northerly 15 knots. Lynn Canal and down through Stevens Passage, waves there 2 to 3 feet. East winds to 20 knots, waves upwards of 6 to 8 feet here, Dixon Entrance. And as we get further along the coast, nearshore waters, easterly winds to 30 knots off of Prince of Wales Island with waves 10 to 13 feet, and they continue around 20-25 knot easterly winds from Port Alexander, Sitka up to Cross Sound, waves 7-8 feet there, and then winds generally east-northeast 10 knots, Yakutat to Cape Suckling with 5-foot waves. Winds across the northwestern Gulf southeasterly within Prince William Sound at 15 knots and 15-knot southeast winds outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance. Waves a couple of few feet within Prince William Sound, 4 or 5 feet outside of Hinchinbrook. And then for the Cook Inlet area, east winds of 15 knots around Anchorage, Turnagain Arm, 2 to 3 foot waves, and then variable winds around 10 knots off of Anchor Point, Kamishak Bay, and in the vicinity of Homer with waves maybe 2 to 3 feet. For Tuesday, northeast winds 15 knots, 2 to 3 foot waves within Prince William Sound. East northeast winds 15 knots, Kayak Island to Hinchinbrook Entrance. Coming down, upper Middle Cook Inlet, north winds to 10 knots, waves 2-3 feet, and then northwest winds out of Kamishak Bay through Kennedy Entrance with waves 4 to 5 feet. Monday across Kodiak Island, the upper Alaska Peninsula, including the wider expanse of Bristol Bay, variable winds at 10 knots and waves just a few feet. Winds turn more north-northwest, 15 to 20 knots, the southern half of the peninsula, with waves generally running 4 or 5 feet on the north side there in the Bering, and 2 to maybe 4 or 5 feet there, highest off of False Pass. Tuesday we'll have north winds in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 5 feet. Variable winds trailing out along the Alaska Peninsula at about 10 knots, waves 3 to maybe as much as 5-6 feet there at Cold Bay and False Pass. The Aleutians will generally see northerly winds, the eastern and central Aleutians, northerly winds 20 to maybe as high as 25 knots Monday. Those winds become southerly 20 knots west of Kiska. And then on Tuesday, with the next low pressure, we are going to see some gale force winds in the southwest quadrant of that low. That's going to be located just north of the central Aleutians Tuesday afternoon. Ahead of it, southeast to south winds 25 to 30 knots through the eastern Aleutians, veering southwesterly 30 knots Atka to Adak. And then west of Adak, we're looking at northwesterly gales to 40 knots all the way through Kiska, Shemya, with waves on the order of 19 to 23 feet. And for Monday, variable winds 10 knots within Bristol Bay, west winds 10 knots into Kuskokwim Bay. Otherwise, northwest winds 20-25 knots, St. Matthew to St. Paul. And for the lower Yukon coast, look for winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. South winds there, the wider expanse between Imanik and Nome there of Norton Sound, with waves running right around 3 feet. And then on Tuesday, we have a mix of winds. Northeast offshore winds at 10 knots in Bristol and Kuskokwim Bay with waves 2 to 3 feet. Southeast winds 20 knots in the vicinity of the Pribilovs with waves 5-6 feet. And as we go along the Yukon coast, west winds to 10 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet, but southeast winds within Norton Sound at 10 knots and waves 2 to 3 feet. South of the Bering Strait, south winds 10 knots along the west side of the Seward Peninsula, Nome to Wales, waves 3 feet. North side of St. Lawrence Island could see northeast winds of 15 knots, waves 3 to 5 feet, highest around Gamble. Coming up the Chukchi Sea, look for southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, becoming easterly and increasing 25 knots Wainwright through Utqiagvik to 30 knots Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik, with waves where there is still some open water, 7-8 feet there along the Beaufort Sea. On Tuesday, winds will come down a little bit, with the exception of here, Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik, still easterly winds of 30 to 35 knots, waves 6 to 8 feet. Easterly winds of 25 knots Utqiagvik, those east winds start to fall off Wainwright to Point Lay, and then still easterly flow here, the Lisburn Peninsula out of Kotzebue Sound at 10 to 15 knots on Tuesday. Waves in the lower Chukchi Sea 3 to 4 feet in the nearshore waters, and then passing through the Bering Strait. Winds turn northeasterly at 10 knots around Wales, Port Clarence with waves of a couple of feet. But the north side of St. Lawrence Island, especially there west of Savunga to Gamble, could see north winds of 20 knots with waves of 4 to 5 feet on Tuesday.